does these things is after the engagement, they would post the video on YouTube and other social media platforms. So there are people who are definitely going to be engaging or watching that who may not have the opportunity to engage the panelists. And so that is where I may come in if there's need for some clarity on anything, so that if people are watching on their own without the benefit of a direct engagement or question, then they will be able to fully appreciate whatever it is that has been discussed. And so again, I'm sure for the lead discussants, you all have the concept note. So there are three key themes that would guide our conversation. We're looking at how to, leverage sports as a vector for social inclusion, because we're talking about development here. We're also looking at how sports can be used to promote peace and integration in society. And then the more economic angle of things, that's also something that we would look at here. So these three key issues would guide the conversation that we would have today. And I have every confidence in the people that we are going to be engaging. So thank you, all of you, once again, for joining, and of course for the many others who are also connecting to listen, to engage, and to ask questions. Really appreciate that all of you connect with us. And so, Bismarck, maybe if I could get a cue from you. It's 11 on the dot from where I am. So maybe you can give me a cue if you think that we're good to go now. We may proceed. But if you think that there are, you did a publicity work. If there are some more people going to join, and perhaps you want us to wait for some 5 minutes or something like that, the decision is with you. Advise me, and then we can proceed.
I think we are good to go. Also to mention that we have started a live stream on Facebook.
Okay.
So you can start now. Yeah.
Very well. Thank you very much, Bismarck, and thank you to everybody for joining us for this all-important conversation. As you may be aware, today, being the April 2022, is a day set by the United Nations, among other partners, to recognize sports for development. And this year, the broad theme that we are working with is monetizing the sports value chain for youth economic empowerment and peace building. It's really, really important that we talk about this, because for most of us, we have a sense of sports and our appreciation of sports. And if you love football, and especially if you are Ghanaian, sports has become synonymous, or football has become synonymous with sports. And very recently, we saw how in the World Cup qualifiers, or the playoffs, we saw the beauty that it presented back to all of us here. The Jollof Derby, the Ghana-Nigeria encounter. We have so many things that divide us, and we have a lot of things that also bring us together. And anytime that particular bit comes to the fore, we see the sort of excitement and enjoyment that all of us get from this and all of that. And after days, we are still trolling our Nigerian brothers and sisters, and they find other avenues to also troll us, and we all look at that and proceed to go forward. I've heard many say, for instance, that yes, Nigeria did not qualify, but eventually if we get to the World Cup, they will have no other duty than to support Ghana. So embedded in all the rivalry that comes with sports and competition is also some love, some camaraderie, some good relationship, among other things like that. But what we must also note is that sports is far beyond any of that. And I'll just take a very quick read of excerpts of the concept note to guide this conversation, and then I will introduce the lead discussants who are going to help us to tease out the issues and have a very fruitful engagement today. The United Nations General Assembly declared April 6th as the International Day of Sport for Development and Peace in 2013. recognizing sports' positive impact on attaining sustainable development and the advancement of human rights. The United Nations has also recognized sport that it can be a universal language to promote peace, tolerance, understanding, and also bring people together across boundaries, cultures, religions, and many more. And sports also uniquely is placed in a position where, despite its competition, inherent competition, there are also very important aspects of that. And so sports for development today, particularly in policy and academia, it's become very important an area. And so it is no more viewed only exclusively as a recreational venture. There's a lot more attached to that. But for many of us, we have little to no idea at all how we can tap into these other benefits that come with sports. And so we want to have a conversation today under the auspices of the All Africa Students Union, and particularly under the capacity building working group led by our very own Bismarck Kuduafo Amefiano. He has been leading the charge. So thank you very much, Bismarck, for this opportunity. And on that note, I want to welcome our lead discussants who are going to help us do this conversation today. We're joined by Mr. Leslie Koroma. He is the founder and CEO of Africa Sports Ventures. Mr. Leslie, thank you very much for your time today. If you can unmute and give us a wave or just acknowledge your presence here. We're grateful for your time, sir.
Thank you, and I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to this wonderful conversation. This is something I live for, so thank you for having me.
Very well, sir, and I've heard a lot about the work that you do. Thank you for having time to also join us. We're also joined by Mr. Hussein Al-Hassan. He's a lecturer at the University of Professional Studies, Accra, and he teaches sports marketing and many more. And Mr. Hussein is also a very known journalist. Maybe he's on sabbatical now, but he's been with several media platforms here in Ghana, notably Joy, Class FM, and TV3, many other platforms like that. But he's always on the quiet, so you may not know him, but very happy to have you join us also, Mr. Hussein.
Thank you very much, Karim. I am very happy to be here and also very happy to be meeting my colleague discussants on this panel. I am very delighted about it. And like Mr. Koroma said, this is something most of us live for. You don't necessarily need to be a sports journalist or a sports person to know what goes around us, with regards to sport and development and unity and all of that. So I look forward to a very good discussion and to learn from everyone else here.
Well, thank you very much, Hussein, once again for agreeing to be with us. And you make a very important point. We're all here to learn. And one such person that I learn from every day is Mr. Derek Opoti Chawe. Mr. Chawe is a PhD candidate at the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences. And he also formerly with the University of Ghana Sports Directorate, where, he worked in the research department and also was my patron when I was doing my undergraduate studies at the University of Ghana. So I have a very long relationship with Mr. Chawe, and I'm very, very happy to be engaging him here once again. I'm sure all of you are going to love the perspective that he will bring to this conversation. So thank you very much, Mr. Chawe, for also joining us.
Well, thank you, Karim. My voice, I'm losing my voice. So
sorry.
Listeners have to pardon me for that. But as you know, sport for development is an area I've worked in for a long time, working with UK sports and doing the same thing with the Norwegian Olympic Committee as well, and the United Nations Office for Sport for Development for some time, so which is currently defunct. So it will make this discussion very interesting. I'm super happy to join the group and also to see the way forward for sport in Africa.
Very well. Thank you so much to all of you for agreeing to be here. And for those of you who have also joined us, there will be a time for you to engage lead discussants. And so when the time is due, I'll open the platform for you to ask your question, either vocally, orally, or you could also send in a message in the chat box, and then we'll read it to them to get the responses. So let's get into the conversation now. And I want to start with Mr. Leslie Koroma. Like I indicated earlier, I'll take some preliminary thoughts from all of you, some 5 minutes, to generally give us a sense of what you make of sports and its role in engaging young people for peace and for development. It is true that even though sports contributes largely to development, to peace and all of that, there's also an element of distraction. Oftentimes we're seeing issues of hooliganism, among other things like that. But depending on the perspective that you are coming from and the work that you do in the area of sports, you are at liberty to approach this from any perspective or angle that you deem fit. And so, Mr. Leslie Koroma, you'd have the platform for the next 5 minutes. Talk to us, anything at all. We're here to learn from you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow discussants, moderator, distinguished guests and members of the All Africa Student Union, I greet you on this International Day of Sports for Peace and Development in this year 2022. As we observe it, this very important webinar to put focus on how Africa can tap into its massive interest in sports and given its very youthful population, how young Africans can benefit from the scaling of sports into a full-fledged industry on the continent as it is in other parts of the world. I come to you as an advocate for such transformation, which is evident in the company I founded back in 2019, Africa Sports Ventures Group. As I was very much ready to end the talk and walk the walk. It is more than evident that with recent developments on the continent, especially that of the creation of the Africa Free Trade Area, that we are now collectively seeking to end most of our very serious and prevalent issues and problems. That of chronic unemployment and lack of opportunities by stimulating growth and economic growth and development across what is now the largest free trade zone in the world. Africa is currently the youngest continent on the planet, and its population is set to double by the year 2050, to over 2 billion people. And given the current economic situation, socioeconomic situation, and its dynamics, we need to have and to find solutions to a good number of our problems that will arise out of this spike in population growth in the next 27 years. Sports is going to have to be a part of the mosaic of solutions to our situation, given its trajectory of growth and development globally as a full-fledged industry on its own, notwithstanding its peripheral effect on other associated industries. The sports industry has been said to be worth over $500 billion. That's a conservative estimate. And with recent additions like sports betting and the crypto effects of the tech age, some have said that its value skyrocketed to over $1 trillion+, even with the dark shadows of the pandemic hanging over. Now, it is true, that's truly a rosy and bright picture for future for our continent that boasts of a very young population and very talented sportsmen and women, which is evident by global athletic performance data. What we seek to look at today is how to monetize the sports value chain for youth economic employment and peace. Well, ladies and gentlemen, monetize, or to put it another way, a highly valued commercial and fully developed sports industry on the continent will be a transformational vehicle that will employ a massive amount of our young while teaching them valuable life skills that will make them better citizens. It is no hidden fact, that inculcating attributes such as great work ethic, perseverance, sacrifice, and being part of a team teaches individuals respect one another, which is a platform for peaceful coexistence of man in society. As each one learns to not only respect each other, but value that of the contribution of others in society within their spaces. These attributes have also been known to be of great value to entrepreneurs. As a continent, our focus should be on how to empower each other with the right skill set to help in developing opportunities for others. As cliche as this may sound, the great Nelson Mandela once said, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire, to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language that they understand. Sports can contribute, create hope where there was once despair. It is more powerful than government in breaking down barriers. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as much advocate and people within the sports space love this quote by the great late Madiba, and it's true. Its true intrinsic value is that it's not only coming from an area of truth speaking, but from a very powerful man. If we seek to transform sport on the continent, it has to be from significant contributors in our socioeconomic environment, and that's from our leadership. We at African Sports Ventures Group are very proud to say that as part of our mandate, we have been very instrumental in attracting key leadership in Africa to this cause. That includes, but not limited to, sports ministers, and the president today, in His Excellency George Okonjo-Iweala of Liberia, the only African footballer to have also won the FIFA Player of the Year. I cite this because it is an uphill climb in helping to change the attitudes and the perception of sports on the continent, was professionalizing and commercializing it for it to be of economic value, without the buy-in of our leaders who will form the vanguard of crafting such policies to guide the growth and development of sports. It will be a tough fight. Policies are vital in setting the stage for the seamless growth of sports, and devoid of which its own associated issues that range from the fight against corruption and to the protection of weak and vulnerable individuals within the space. At the same time, set the stage for a respectable relationship with sports code governing bodies and government. From the very tiny tot stage where kids learn to jump, play, laugh, and run, to the most sophisticated professional levels of sports, there are systems and structures that guide how we can bring value to sports while monetizing it. At a very early age, children have learned to coexist, and teaching them how to play and play together is essential in setting the stage for later development of this individual. As I indicated above earlier, will later transform to valuable skill set that makes for amicable coexistence that bodes well for tolerance and collaboration, regardless of race, creed, religion, and anything else that may pronounce our differences. In the teen years, many are prone to a destructive lifestyle, which can be avoided by gainfully engaging them in sporting pursuits that will augur well for the avoidance of such and set them on the path to a healthy lifestyle. And if fortunate, graduate to individuals that would be doing well for themselves economically. And being in that position would also help to impact others within their immediate surrounding in their community, families. Most of all, a fully developed sports sector with all its bells and whistles in this 21st century will be an avenue for long-term gainful through a variety of avenues. At this point in time, I'll pause and wait for my fellow discussants to step in perspective. And then as we go along, we'll dissect and discuss and proffer solutions to the way forward. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you so much, sir, for that very brief but rather very interesting bit there. And I like the point that you make, drawing from the quotes from Nelson Mandela. And I'm sure as we get into the conversation, we're going to touch a bit more on that and try and appreciate this, because it's really true. And I've had this conversation with Mr. Chawe before about how potent, how powerful sports is. And even, I mean, in Sub-Saharan Africa, if you look at our independence struggles and all of that, how sports was particularly very integral in the processes leading up to the independence struggle. So that's a very fantastic point that you make there. We're going to come back to that for some more. I want to go to Mr. Hassan, Hussein Al-Hassan, to also take his preliminary thoughts on this. For somebody who teaches sports marketing, I'm sure this is obviously in your realm, particularly because of the element of the economics and how to make money from sports. So, Hussein, you're also open to discuss this from any perspective that you want, and then later we'll get into some more specifics. The floor is yours now. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Let me also say again, I don't know which part of the world people are following us from, but from Ghana, let me say good morning. Take it good afternoon or good evening, or I mean from wherever you are. And so as we started, and as Mr. Kuruma said, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development recognizes sport, of course, as a vital enabler of sustainable development, and recognizes the growing contribution that sports has made to development over the years. And we are no strangers, of course, to how much sport has changed the landscape of development. We can quite easily refer to the South African case in 1995, a country that was in apartheid, almost in turmoil, and then had the opportunity to host the 1995 Rugby World Championship. And the president of South Africa at the time, Nelson Mandela, saw that as an opportunity to, rally the nation behind one team. And I remember the tagline for that competition was "One game, one nation." And so almost everyone in South Africa, felt this was an opportunity, regardless of race. This was an opportunity to come together and support the team, because at the end of the day, if the team won, it was going to be South Africa behind, the victory, and not race, whether you're black or white or Asian. So sports historically has played a great role in development. We also remember the case of Ghana, our own Ghana, where President Dr. Kwame Nkrumah back then tried to use sport as the tool to promote Ghana and make it a country recognized around the world, especially coming on the back of Ghana attaining the independence in 1957. So this is a background that serves us well as to how sports can contribute to development. Now let's come to contemporary times. I'm sure, again, we're all strangers to the football space, where academies over time have produced players for teams abroad. We know of the case of Feyenoord. We know the case of Ajax, who have bought into Ajax Cape Town in South Africa, and the Asset Mimosas Academy, who have supplied many talents to European clubs. Now, what that does in a larger scale of matters is, whereas these footballers contribute to the growth of football on the continent, on the wider scale, they contribute to development, because the money they make from these clubs are sent back to their home countries to support family, to support friends, to invest in businesses, and all of these things. So on a wider scale, sports plays a very important role economically in developing people. As someone speaking from a purely academic point of view, we have organized programs in sports development, sports management for the industry. And these sports programs are not only focused on training them to manage sports teams or sports clubs, but these are programs that also train them into managing all other aspects of their life. So in terms of its development, it is wide scale. So I think that I would end my preliminary talks here, as we look forward to taking further questions from you on the discussion.
Very well. Mr. Hussein, thank you very much also for keeping this very brief. And of course, there's a lot to still unpack. And so we're definitely going to get into that. I want to get now to Mr. Chawi to also give us his preliminary remarks there. Also coming from the background of an academic, and also as maybe as a practitioner, a former footballer also. I need to add that. So Chawi, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes to also address us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think this is very important. In regards to all the listeners, I must say that sport was recognized as part of the Millennium Development Goals But the Millennium Development Goals was very myopic, like it has a very close focus in the sense that the focus was on the global south. By global south, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and what have you. And they felt that these areas are the quintessential domains for development. So everything was channeled to us. And the interesting thing here is that you have these initiatives coming from the global north, which is Europe, Americas, and what have you. So there was exchange of implementation tools and what have you. And sometimes these things don't work when you take an implementation tool without localizing it. It becomes a problem. So this is how the name Sport for Development actually came. And it was essential because Kofi Annan, who is an African, and played a key role in the Millennium Development Goals. And the result was that it did not really work. Sport for development as a field, as an academic field, is still fragmented. We don't know what it is. It's not really been defined. It's not classified. But Southern Africa, for instance, Zambia, South Africa took it very seriously and ran with it. Long story short, the UNOSDP, which is the United Nations Office for Sport for Development, couldn't function as it was supposed to. So it became defunct, it broke down, and then it was handed over to the IOC. The IOC in itself is a sport development organization. So there is no way they can function and make sport for development an interesting field. The thing is, what is sport for development? It is the use of sport to achieve social, economic, and environmental objectives. These are very broad definitions. So it becomes very difficult to actually focus what sport for development is. So for me, my particular interest, having worked in the university for 10 years and having worked as a practitioner with different organizations worldwide, I've worked with the Football for Peace International, Korean Sharing Movement, UK Sport, and then now here in Norway. I've realized that it's important for us to take a policy front, just like Mr. Leslie said. We have to localize our approach to sport for development because we have unique cultural perspectives, we have unique backgrounds, and with our cultures come with shaping what sports should be and what the focus of sports for development is supposed to be. So in a nutshell, I'll say that the field is very underrated, and it's like falling in love with a woman or a man whom you love so much that you get blind. We don't really know the importance of what sports can do for a nation. My recent research, particularly in Ghana, revealed that the political element drives sports so much. What this means is that you have politicians actually using sports for canvassing when the election times are near. I went further to do a comparative research with a professor or an academic from Zambia, and the results were similar. And like I said, to wrap it up, what is even more problematic is the fact that we have to wait as a continent, as nations, for the United Nations to draw attention that sport is an important enabler, as Mr. Hussein said, before we started taking and the bull by the horns, before we started bringing sport, which is a private venture, don't forget, into the public space, before we started adding sport into our development and policy objectives. So we are late, but not too late. There is a lot we can do to define what sports is. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult to quantify sport. And in terms of what Mandela said was just a statement. And we have not really provided evidence to buttress that statement. And that's why even in South Africa, some of the problems still persists. So until we understand what it is, I think until we understand what it is and provide more evidence to government, it will be very, very difficult to, redefine, to define what sports is and how we want to tackle sport both in the social space, in the environmental space, and then in the economic space. So in a nutshell, basically that, and I reserve further comments for more detailed discussions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chawe, for that bit. And so I want us to then zoom right away into the discussion. And here I'll come in with a few questions. And I want to start with you, or stay with you, Mr. Chawe, because the point that you make is very important. And I was wondering, particularly because all of you agree on the need to localize sports, and that through that we're able to achieve the development that is intended.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you share about the general misconceptions, misunderstandings, and appreciation of what sports is? Because it appears that if you take a place like Ghana, there is an excessive, focus on sporting disciplines that are commercially viable. So like football,
yeah.
like boxing to an extent, but there are local indigenous sporting features. And I know that you academics call it physical cultures. So to what extent do you think that we haven't appreciated that aspect? And how is that contributing to our inability to attain development that ordinarily should be associated with sports?
Yeah, thank you so much. I like the topic so much about the public, about value chain, right? Yeah, but I don't like the aspect of the monetizing. It sounds a little bit different because I've always said that the sports business, when you put money in, especially when you involve the public government, we are not expecting to make profit, right? We just let them go, let's say for the national teams, and then they go and win. They use all the money. We are not expecting profit, isn't it? Yeah, but we understand that these things heals us as a nation. It doesn't divide us. Right. So basically, to answer your question, I would say that gradually what was private, you can take it from even Africa and elsewhere, it was private. But we've seen the essence of it because it's always part of the community. Sports, physical activity, physical cultures, it's a cultural practice. It's been part of us, right? But as we signed a social contract, and then we have government and we have the people. Gradually, we left it in the communities. We did not add it to government business, right? So now that is coming into the public space, and then it's important for us to understand that we have to work with multiple actors to define this. Often, we have passionate people, we have former athletes, we have people without qualifications at all. We have people who do not really understand that the sports field is broad. We have economics of sports, we have sport marketing, we have sociology of sport and all that. We bring all these different actors together to help shape and define what our sport is. Unfortunately, we have not done that, right? So it's not surprising that you have EPL dominating our local leagues, right? It's unfortunate that you have even those playing rugby, right? You have UK rugby, you have those playing cricket following the T series and what have you, So, and that's for me, that's where the problem is. We don't even appreciate our own league system. We don't appreciate our own sport. We don't appreciate our local games. That it is somebody's cultural practice, right? They defined it, they set rules for it, and then they made it global, and they are profiting from it. We don't even appreciate our local games. I know there is a wrestling in Senegal somewhere, which I do enjoy. Sometimes I watch, and even when you go to the comment section, it's pretty sad, right? So what I'm just trying to say is that if we want to look at it from a policy point of view,
yeah,
then I think we have to couple we have to add policy implementation. We have to add the bottom up and then the top up, and the bottom up and then the top down sort of like approach. And this shouldn't just be insane, because policy, I've said before, and it's written in some books, that is a noun, and implementation is a verb. So you need a verb you need an action to make it work.
yeah.
So if we bring all these multiple actors together to define what our sport is, then we'll go a long way to appreciate what it is, right? And because we've not done that, you have people who are just passionate about it, people who don't appreciate that it's an academic endeavor, it's a social endeavor, it's a financial endeavor, it's an environmental endeavor, we bring all these different aspects together to redefine it. So in a nutshell, I would say that we have to appreciate all the multiple actors and bring them on board, and not just for political sake. We bring people to occupy public offices or government offices and just do anything at all. I have quite a lot of sports policies of most African countries, and it's so sad to go through them, to be honest with you. And this includes my own country, Ghana. Right? You see the holes in it is so huge, and you can see clearly that there's not been engagement with various stakeholders in defining what sports is. So basically, that's what I would say about that. That
Okay.
It's important for us to know that sport, although a private venture, provides public services. So
Okay.
we need to bring all these people together to define it. Thank you.
I see. Thank you very much. And I want to bring in Mr. Hussein in here. I'll come to Mr. Leslie, particularly because of the kind of work that he does, to provide some responses for me. But Mr. Hussein, you teach sports marketing, and this point that I asked Mr. Chawe is very important. We don't seem to have done a very good job, especially in Africa, to help commercialize. And I know that ideologically, Mr. Chawe has some bit of an issue with that, but we haven't done a very good job at commercializing that. And so people don't find value in sporting disciplines that are more indigenous to us and all of that. Well, what do you think is the missing link here? Why do you think the footballs, the wrestlings, the UFCs, and especially those ones that are imported, are very popular and more commercially viable than what we have locally? Hussein, you may have to unmute for us because we can't hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Awesome.
Okay. All right. So I heard Mr. Chawe talk about a bottom-up approach and how things should be tackled holistically. And I think that in a part of the world, those are some of the things missing. You find people, for example, the current Football Association in charge of our football coming into office, and he spoke about policies. I honestly have been in the sports industry for over 10 years, and I am yet to cite any proper policies of any administration that has run football or sports in Ghana. There's almost nothing like that. What you hear is they are good at slogans. I mean, you hear Keto Kweku talking about before he came into office, talking about capacity building, talking about game changing, and all of those things. Those things are just things on paper. But the question is, what work has been put in to ensure that these things that they talk about happen? There's almost none. And I'll cite to you an example. When they came into office, I developed a program in brand management for sports to the Ghana Football Association to give them training. And we got the management of UPSA, University of Professional Studies, to approve it as part of the university's corporate social responsibility towards Ghana and towards football. Can you believe that this FA, the Football Association, haven't taken advantage of it? We had an initial good meeting with the president of the FA, but from then on, it's been almost about 2 years, and we haven't heard from them. So these are things that they just churn out words, and there's not a proper plan. If we are going to market our football or our sport well, it needs to be a holistic approach. We need to tackle things from all angles. Make sure that marketing is well, accounting, budgeting is well, sponsorship. Take a holistic approach towards things. If we're only going to focus on going to tournaments, qualifying for competitions and doing well, we are going to go to the competition, perform well or not, come back to ground zero, and there are no structures in place to ensure that we market our sports. Now, coming back again to the question you cited, what needs to be done? I think we need a certain level of training for people going into the sports industry. We don't need just anyone to go into the sports industry, but you need to have a certain level of qualification, or be it a diploma, be it a certificate, or anything of the sort, because you have way too many people in our sports industry treating sports as a wayside job, and it hasn't got to be like that, because when you go to the advanced countries that we're looking to be like, there are proper structures in place in a lot of places around the world. You don't just get up and go into the sports industry, for example. You need a certain level of qualification, and that takes me to how some of these academies in our part of the world starts. Some are a bit organized, like the ASEC Mimosas Academy, for example, very well organized, very well marketed. They are known for something. They are known for churning out quality talents. Kolo Toure is one of the high-profile guys who have come out of that academy. We also know the Feta Feyenoord case, and which is now the West Africa Football Academy, WAFA, and a few other examples of the sorts. Now, these are areas we can build from. We can start with churning out. We can bring back our Colts leagues, for example, but very well organized. Start from there. Get clubs to sell some of these players, make revenue, and reinvest. When they reinvest into these clubs, they are able to build structures which eventually will help us be able to market the products, our leagues, as good as we would want them to be. One of the problems that we face again is that because the clubs are unable to make enough money to reinvest into the clubs, they are unable to purchase quality players or develop players from the grassroots. The quality of players, to a greater extent, tells a lot about the league, because people want to watch quality football. If I go to the stadium, for example, and the football is not top notch, I'd rather watch Chelsea or Manchester United on TV than go to the stadium go to the stadium to watch Accra to look at Kumasi and Kotoko, where the level of football is appalling. So if these clubs have structures in place, are able to sell players and reinvest into the clubs, reinvesting is where it's something that helps them gather very good players from the grassroots. I'm sure that gradually we'll be able to build enough quality players into our league, and that would lead to watching the league more, paying more for it, and then the other effect, or what we call the
Hello, Hussein. I don't know if it's from my end, but
I think
can anyone else? Yeah, we lost him. Sorry. Okay. That's we'll try and reconnect with him and get him to finish with that point. But while we do that, I want to go to Mr. Koroma. And Mr. Koroma, I have deliberately put you on the back bench just so you listen to the points that the academics are making, because the kind of work that you do brings you to some direct engagement with young people and people on the ground. And for me, that is very important. But and so when you listen to Mr. Chawe and you listen to Mr. Hussein, what is the impression that you get when you work with people on the ground? Where's the difficulty in promoting sport and achieving development from sport coming from, really? You can share the experiences from your work on the ground, and then I'll ask some further questions after that.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Obviously, I see that we, well, let's put it this way. Africa is benefiting from the advances and the developments that have taken place in the West, and most of the West. I'll say the West because the West leads. And then, of course, you have the Asian countries as well, like Japan and South Korea, and of course, China, which lately has adopted a very robust strategy in terms of developing the sports sector. What we have to think or know for a fact is that we're not really that far behind in terms of trying to adopt best practices in the industry. I say this because most African countries are about 50, 60 years old as independent nations, whilst we have countries that are 200 and 300 years old, and then we're trying to play catch up with. First of all, we have to put that in perspective. That's first thing. Secondly, in the sports space, the sport has actually developed in the last 3 decades to what it is today, to an industry that it is today. I can cite the NBA as an example, and also the NFL in the USA, being that the kind of money that we're seeing in the NBA, in the development of a structure that we see in the NBA today, which is today a $9 billion league, actually came of age in the late 80s to early 90s. And today we're seeing the transformation of the league itself to what it is now, where we are soon to see a $500 million player, a player being paid up to $500 million in contract. We've seen that in the NFL already, where the guy from, what's his name, Patrick Mahomes for the Kansas City Chiefs was given a salary of about $500 million, for the duration of his contract. And we're soon to see $1 billion contracts out there. All I'm saying basically is that these transformations have taken place in the last 2 to 3 decades because it is what is this? As anything grows, it develops and transforms. And we, on the other hand, in Africa, think that we're very, very far behind. Well, in reality, the fact is that we have a chance to play catch up, and not only play catch up, but we have technology which can help us to leapfrog a lot of developmental stages to really get up to speed with what we want to do. All we have to do is come to terms with the reality that we didn't have that much of quality leaders in the past in terms of the type of people that would transform the sports space and play and keep pace with what was going on. The British themselves, with the English Premier League, had to play catch up with what was going on in the USA. They had to basically copy what was going on with the NFL and the NBA for them to be what they are today in terms of TV viewership and so much more. And of course, setting the structures and systems in place for them to be what they are today, major contributors to the British economy. I hear the talk about the quality of the play and the quality of the games in Ghana with Asante Kotoko and the other teams. Now, look, let me put it this way to you. The leaders, the people that find themselves in those teams that are leaders or administrators, they themselves are bumbling around. Most of them really don't know what exactly they're doing. So they need leadership. They need leadership. And that leadership maybe could come from the academic sector, like from Mr. Chawe and Mr. Hussein themselves, and people like myself who are in the space. We actually are fortunate. I say we're fortunate because we're at the vanguard of where we need to go in the sports space in the world as it is right now. So I'm not really going to cry about spilled milk, about what we're not doing right now. I'm really focused on what we're going to be doing going forward, how we can transform the space, how we can make it better to what it is, what it's not right now. And that's what it should be about. Yes, there are a lot of shortcomings, a lot of shortfalls, a lot of issues out there, but they're all fixable. They're all things that can be amended, adjusted, things that could be created, new innovations that we could put into play out there. And so In my experience of being in the sports space for the last, I say 3 decades, and from being a former athlete to being a sports media person to now a business, someone in the sports business domain, I think that I've seen the transformation through time. I've seen when people didn't really care about what was happening in the sports space in Africa, but today now we see that inward focus. And what we need now is, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm glad we're having this webinar, because this is the time that we actually need now to actually come together and actually transform the space. We have the opportunity to do that. We have the chance to do that. We have the wherewithal to do that. It's within our purview to do that and take that forward.
Yeah, so Mr. Koroma, I want to stay with you, and pardon me if you struggle to hear me. It's raining quite heavily here, so there might be some noise in the background. But I am worried a bit here about what our understanding of sports for development is, because isn't the excessive commercialization, because the examples that you draw from the United States, even though these are very important and development can come from the economic perspective, our focus on the commercialization may also lead to a certain problem at the grassroots and in various villages, local communities, and all of that. How should we be addressing the question of sports for development in a very holistic manner, so that even for the poorest of people, the most marginalized of communities, they can still appreciate the very essence of sports and also get the benefit of sports in respect of the development that we are talking about?
Okay, great one. Definitely, I like the point Ms. Chawe made earlier about, and I would, of course, it was segueing from what I said with regards to policies. Policies are what will protect, like you say, the integrity of sports within the local community, from the smallest level to whatever it is. For you to have a scout from wherever, from Europe or from wherever they are from, to come and go to a village and try to scout out a 5-year-old or 10-year-old, that's basically, like you say, is, we're basically looking at the commercial aspect of sports as it transforms and translates to what people think, okay, this child is going to be worth this much value, is going to have this much value. So for me, I think government policies will be the way forward in terms of putting certain strategies and of course enforced policies that have to be enforced. In other words, if I could say that, because we need to pay attention to not just having the policies on the documents themselves and for it to just sit there, but also, they actually have to be to enforce these policies, because these are essentially laws. So I feel like policies will be vital in terms of not taking the commercialization of sports to that level to where it starts to affect the integrity of sports at a very pristine stage of development, where you have 5 and 10-year-olds who are just learning how to run and play and laugh and be children themselves. So I think that will be the go-to strategy for me in this case. Over commercialization, I don't think there's anything called over commercialization, because sports is going to be sports at the highest level. Okay, we just have to face up to that reality. It's how we demarcate, we separate what happens at the professional level, to the collegiate level, to the school level, to the community level where the kids learn to play. Is where it's at, and that's why I say policies will be what separates how you protect these different environments from it being affected by the over commercialization, as you say, as you put it. But I don't think there's anything called over commercialization, because at the end of the day, sports for development is how we translate what happens in the sports space for it to be of economic value to society, right? And if you cannot commercialize, then it's not of any economic value. So definitely we have that dichotomy, or that fine line that we have to walk to make sure we don't see that so being over commercialized, but at the same time we want it to be commercialized because we seek to see the value that it presents for society. I mean, so that's why I say I don't see anything that's over commercialized in this case. In this case, all we have to do is how do we protect the different levels or stratas of development as these kids come up, kids who are learning how to play, right? They learn how to play. Now, not everybody is going to make it to the pro level. Not everybody is going to. Out of the millions of kids who will pick up a ball to try and learn how to kick a ball or how to dribble a basketball, not every one of them are going to make it to that next level. Some of them are going to drop by the wayside and become, but what we have to teach now is how, because as I think Mr. Hussein said earlier, the issue is, we see a lot of people who take sports as just some kind of casual occupation. And it's not a casual occupation. It needs to be embraced as a full-time occupation because it's an industry itself. And we have to learn how to develop these individual industries. The clubs that we talked about, right? The Asante Kotoko's and so on and so forth. These clubs have to learn how to properly position themselves to be commercial operations. In other words, let me put it that way, because they're at the pro level. They have to be fully commercialized, but with sticking to the policies that are put in place. Now, each club can be able to employ up to 300 or 400 people effectively, year in, year out, right? But if they're not developing their systems well enough, with the overarching structure of the FA itself, the Ghanaian Football Association, being oversight body, making sure that it enforces that these clubs follow best practices for them to be able to create employment within their own systems, into their own individual ecosystems, and sustain those employees and treat them fairly, then I don't see how we can actually see sports being a tool for development down the road, because that's the essence of it. For it to be a tool for development, we have to see how we can translate the skills, the ecosystem of where these clubs and these individuals exist, to it becoming an economic engine for growth and development within the communities and the country as a whole and the continent at large.
Okay, fantastic points that you make there. I don't know if Mr. Hussein is back, but I want to go to Mr. Chawe first, and then I'll go to Mr. Hussein. So, Mr. Chawe, I want us to move into another leg of this conversation, but you would quickly touch on this aspect for me, and I'll add another question to that. So, the issues that Mr. Koroma raises, as I was talking about the excessive commercialization and all of that, you would notice also that broadly within the market system, when capital is at the center of anything, there could also come with it some inequality because access may not be the same. His solution to that is that the policies ought to disaggregate these issues and address them accordingly. That's a fantastic point that he makes there. But do you get a sense that I was also making earlier, that sports for development is not evenly distributed because of the commercial aspect of that? So I wanted to attach that, address that briefly for me, but then still talk about value chain, because today, if we want to sustain sports, Mr. Koroma is right, we need to pay attention to creating value. How do we create that value as well?
You see, like I said from the beginning, it is a struggle, right, to mop up a strategy because we don't have the definition of it. But I agree with Mr. Koroma that we have to catch up. But you see, until you have that strategy, it becomes very difficult. You catch up forever. Let's take it this way. Let's take it this way, the history of the world, right? First, we have a public sector dominated by the state, or let's say those elected as leaders, or let's say the kings at the time. And then there was an outcry that no, we need private ownership. So the private people took over. Little did we know that these private guys want to take the role of the kings or the states or what have you, right? And then what did they do? They started introducing all these ideologies, liberalization, neoliberalization, developing into globalization, which we have now. So there is always a kind of confusion between private and then the public sector. And one of the solutions is to have this public-private partnership, right? So for me, I see the whole thing as try as much as possible to create this sort of partnership between the private and public sectors, where all these stakeholders come together to, define what the way forward would be like. Now, let's look at it this way. I was looking at two things. First of all, let's conceptualize what sports for development is, or what sport development is, for the benefit of our viewers who do not know. That you would often hear these two words or these two phrases, sport development and sport for development. For those who read a lot and those who are in the academia, basically sport for development is a little bit different. So under sport, you have the sport for development. And what do they do? The sport for development sector, they are for you here, usually sport for education, sports for gender, sports for disability, sports for health, sports for human rights, sports for peace and reconciliation, poverty and social exclusion. All these things are under sport for development. But if we look at the other section, which is development of sport or sport development, that one is a little bit different. That one looks at it's designed to assist those who engage in organized sports. For instance, elite sports coaching, technologies, public participation, sports stadiums, and all those things, right? So it's important for us to know the difference. Which one are we? Are we for sport for development? That's where the Scandinavian countries are very good at. We have a philosophy which is sport for all. That's another sport for development. And we are going to move it that way. We develop our communities, we develop our districts, and then we bring all those private sports associations like the football association, the athletics, what have you, together. And we are not going to shun them, right? They would be our client to help us develop the country. That's the Scandinavian style. Now, the American style. The Americans focus more on development of sports. Everything is shifted to the private sector, and they have been doing a lot. That's why the NBA are private companies, the NBL, the NFL, the National Hockey Associations, all these ones are private ventures, right? And America do not have any sports ministry whatsoever. So many countries don't have it, but it is the strategy. How are we going to approach this? What is our philosophical idea to approach this? Whether it's commercialization, it's private, I see all these as the effects of the problem, right? We need to tackle it from the root cause. If you don't have an idea, whatever you'll be doing, you'll be catching up, you'll be struggling to get it, right? Because the whole thing, it's become globalized, right? And we are finding a way to fit in. Until we have our perspective of how to approach this, it's very difficult. And you see, the people are there. The people to help these things happen are there. We cannot do this without the private sector, no. We cannot do this without the people, no. Right? And if we bring all these people together, all these, like I said earlier on, that we need multiple actors, if we bring them together, and I'm pretty sure that we can make headways in this. And I know about this in the 80s was when sport shifted, right? The introduction of the international, the internet TVs, commercializations, the ESPNs, the ITVs, and what have you. That's what changed the landscape. And these private institutions or corporations are very strong, and they are very, very radical in their approach. And that's why we are saying that as a continent, how do we approach this? How do we, create a niche? Because we have the market, 2 billion people. Just look at the number of people struggling to watch EPL, right? We have to satisfy them. I watched the World Cup qualifications, the last playoff, Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, Algeria, Morocco, Congo, all these people, the stadium were filled. They tell you the market is ready. Yeah. But if you are confused, you cannot get into this market, right?
So I want to come in here briefly,
yeah.
and
please go on.
And just also to assist a lot of young people who are struggling to find their feet in this space. Many of us have largely become consumers of sports, and we're not able to tap into the value chain, as it were. Yeah. So touch on that briefly for me. what opportunities, economic opportunities exist for young people?
I think there is. The fact that you see Mr. Leslie Koroma here, he said 30 years. He's a true example of the space is there for us, right? People were surprised when I said I want to be in the field. I had opportunities to work in the telecommunication because I studied business management. But this is a field that I felt that is very, very open, is very diverse. And if you work a little harder, you get you definitely get a space in there. Right. So I mean, just to the question that you asked, I would say that just stay focused. I know there are some PhD students that I know are on this platform also listening. I run a YouTube channel where I interviewed various kinds of leaders across the world and who are studying sports. And you see, I've interviewed people from sports and social activism. I've interviewed people who are directors of universities. I've interviewed people who work with the Olympics. I've interviewed people who work for the FIFA. And I think next week I'm interviewing somebody who has created a table tennis technology called Fastpong in Korea. He's from Iran, but he got a funding to do that from Korea and currently based in Korea. And he's also got other fundings from the UK and what have you. So the space is there. We shouldn't just be consumers of it, just like you said. We have to explore the space, right? And if we don't explore, it'll be very difficult for us to make a way in this. But I mean, just to add again, the problem that seemed to persist, right, is the role of government in this space. The private sector has done excellently well and has held this space for the past, I mean, decades, right? It is recently that it's recently, and I'm saying this in relation to Africa as a continent, that government is taking interest in this, that you're seeing people fighting to be ministers of sports, that you see sports added to national development plans, you know. So it's very important for us as young people to explore this space. Just this is an example of internet. When the internet boom in China, and China opened its market a little bit, and the Jack Ma's and what have you came, they made a lot of money, right? But you know what happened? The Chinese governments did not understand how to set protocols to control the internet space. So what they did was they were able to sponsor people to study this space for decades, right? Because they don't know how to control somebody like Jack Ma, who has not only a database in China, but also in America, in different places, right? And the likes. So what they did was they set people up to study the space. And they realized that if you are able to get hold of the IP addresses, you are able to control these guys. And that's exactly what they did. And for some time now, Jack Ma is lost and nobody knows what's happening, right? So for us to understand the space, I wouldn't say regulate the space, but to create an enabling environment. So even the private ventures could even, you know, grow very well. Government has a role to play. There has to be a partnership, a private-public partnership to resolve or to create an enabling environment or a viable environment for the sports sector to grow. I'll say this and say it again, this is doable. The people are there. I have met different people. I've met excellent scholars from Africa doing extraordinary things in other continents. So once we create the enabling environment, I'm pretty sure that they will come. Yeah.
That's a very important point that you make there. I want to bring Mr. Hussein back in now. Sorry that we lost you at some point there. So at this point, I'm trying to get us to explore the very many avenues that are available, particularly with a focus on young people. I mean, in the area of sports marketing, I'm sure you do this. You have even talked about one already when you created a module that the Ghana Football Association expressed interest in. This is something that I'm sure in itself can generate revenue. I know you have hosted shows on TV platforms that have attracted advertisement, among other things like that. Share with us and our viewers across the world what opportunities exist in the value chain of sports that we can begin to take advantage of. Your microphone. You saying your microphone is off. Yeah.
Okay. Is it okay now?
Yes,
okay.
Fantastic.
Right. So the opportunities, as Mr. Chawe said, are abound in the sports industry. There are quite a lot of them. Now, personally, what I ensure is that for any graduating students, the sports marketing is part of the BSc marketing program. So it's a level 400 program. Now, what I ensure is that for every graduating class, there are a group of people forming a sports agency, coming together to form a sports agency or a sports group or something of the sort to try to make a way into the sports industry. The last class I handled, for example, the guys said they wanted to go into sports kit manufacturing. And I've got a very good friend, a young guy doing very, very well here who needs support. Abdurazak Zakari, probably you've met him or you've heard his name. He's into sports kits manufacturing, and his company currently kits Accra Great Olympics and Dreams FC football clubs. And I've spoken to him to train these guys into sports kits manufacturing. So there are a lot of areas people can go into. And unlike previously when a footballer or a sports person was just on his own trying to make ends meet or trying to secure contracts abroad or manage a whole lot of things on his own, sport has become a lot bigger. And so there are various things that people can get into aside the technical areas of coaching and being referees or things like that. People can go into the management bit of sports. People can go into the PR bit of sports, and I see a lot of young people do it, especially people who practice with the local language speaking media houses. They do some levels of PR, and these are people that you can train to become professionals, okay, and who can go into the spaces and do very, very well. So again, I stress on training people. I heard Mr. Chawe talk about meeting people outside of Ghana, Ghanaians doing very well.
Hello, Hussein. I don't know. I think we've lost Hussein again. Yeah, I think we have lost him.
Yes, the rain. Yeah. I think the rain is
very
heavy.
I mean, it's been raining quite heavily in Accra. The path we're around the same area. So, but so Mr. Chawe, I want to come back to you very quickly before I go to Mr. Koroma, because you said you wanted to talk about a theory as regards the public value chain. You may do that very briefly for us.
Yeah, I mean, just before Mr. Hussein went, I mean, if anybody wants to explore this field, they can always send me a message. I have a lot of sessions with, especially I get a lot of messages from our African friends, and I'm always available for them. Yeah, and I wanted to add that with the public value that you talked about, there is a theory, and people can check how that theory works. It talks about the public sphere, which contain both the private, the government, and then the market, which is the people. And at the center of it, let's say sports. So at the center of it is sports. But the value chain in itself, in every value chain, there is the input, the output, the input, the output, and then the outcome, which is what we desire most. But often between the inputs and the outputs is the market, that is the people. We should always not forget them. We have to understand their desires. We have to understand their taste. We have to understand what they want. And that's the market, right? So if the African people desire a particular kind of sports, we have to find a way to meet that demand. If we can also create a sport or position it in such a way that it falls within the ethos and the values of the people of Africa so that it appeals to them, we also have to do that. So this is just a simple concept to say that the inputs are the resources, and then the resources, which are the organizations, which are the private persons, which are the institutions, and then the output. So the organizations would have to partner, right, in creating something that is desirable, a sport that meets the needs and desires of the people. And if that's done, then there's a possibility that we will have very good outcomes. So in a nutshell, without understanding what the people need, it becomes very, very difficult. Otherwise, we'd always look outside and enjoy and what other people are doing. Yeah.
I see. Thank you. Mr. Koroma, I'm coming to you here. So from my own anecdotal experience, when we are in school, and I want you to speak to students for me at this point, when we are in school, the only time that we are introduced to sports is often, of course, for the physical health aspect, but also just for competition among ourselves. We're never trained to see sports and our participation in the sport economy beyond the play, beyond the leisure. So I want you to talk to students who are coming up. What opportunities are available for them? How can they monetize, one, their interest in sports, and two, their participation in sports?
Yeah. Again, I'm gonna go back to the levels of stratas of development of participation in sports, right? So we have the very young youth stage where kids are learning how to run, play, and kick a ball. And at that level, you typically expect not only just the school to be the catalyst for that to happen, but then you also expect the parents to also be involved in, because a lot of times within our communities, our parents are not necessarily very supportive in their case, because they barely have time. They're busy trying to make ends meet. And so it's usually very difficult for parents to take time out to take a child to football practice or whatever, as it's done in the Western world or other parts of the world, right? So that aspect you go from that level to the high school or secondary school level where you start to play organized sports. Now you start to look at, oh, I could do this, and maybe potentially I could do something with this in the long term. And then eventually, as you go from the high school level, most times a lot of young men and women come of age in the high school. At 17, 18, they become superstars, right? And some of them are able to take their skill level straight to the pros. Some of them not quite so much, and they still have years or levels of development for them to go before they get to their levels of maturity. And then eventually you get up to the collegiate level, right? In Africa, for us, basically at this level, at this stage, there is university sports, but as it's done in other parts of the world, it still has yet to be translated into what could be of significant value to the universities themselves, right? Organized sports, at the league level, at the university sport, at the university for the universities themselves, and eventually to where it becomes of something of significant value to the athlete, to the individuals participating. Now, like I said before, not everyone is going to make it to the pros. A very small percentage are going to transcend and make it to the pros in terms of play, right? What do the others who have not, because now you have shattered dreams, dashed dreams, dreams unfulfilled. You got kids who were dreaming of becoming pros, but now it's no longer a reality. They have to face up to their reality. Now that transformation of accepting their reality, of saying, I'm not going to be as good to get to that next level, right? To play for Asante Kotoko or play for Mighty Barole or Enyimba, FC, like in Nigeria. I'm not going to play at that level. I'm not going to be able to sprint like Leonard Myers Mills or Benjamin Asamadi, who's the current record holder for Ghana in the 100 meters. I'm not going to be able to sprint as fast as him. So now what do I do? How do I take my skill set and translate it to something else? Now, as Mr. Hussein said earlier, and Derek said, Mr. Chawi said earlier, there are lots of opportunities in the space, from media to management. When I say media, we're talking about PR and all this other stuff. Now, the only issue here, the only snag here, I would say personally, coming from the experience level I come from, having seen the way these things work, it's not as simple as we may think it is, especially putting that much time into doing this kind of type of stuff and expecting the outcomes that you want. But fortunately, we're at the transformation stage of sports in Africa right now. We're at the cusp of actually leaping to the next level, because today we can brag of having the Basketball Africa League from the NBA Africa, which introduced that. They will see the new transformation of Confederation of African Football with the new dimension that we start to see in the way business is being conducted. These are the two leading sports agency or sports bodies in Africa as far as the commercial aspect of things are, in terms of realizing value. The African Games, which Ghana will host next year in 2023, it's another massive sports property that has to be developed fully by the African Union Sports Council. The African Union Sports Council is responsible for that particular property in collaboration with, of course, ANOCA. My thing is with what's available with the African Games, the Confederation of African Football, with its fully developed with all its bells and whistles, as well as the as Basketball Africa League with NBA Africa, is these organizations are set to transform, to become major employers in the future. So I see a lot of opportunities in these areas. I would say for right now, for most of the students that are here listening, an opportunity to intern with these organizations, including my organization as well, Africa Sports Ventures Group, is there. There's opportunities to intern with these organizations are there, and to gain valuable skills and then potentially be immersed in one of these organizations going forward. The individual clubs, teams that exist out there are also avenues for, so you could actually start to do something like follow a team. For example, you might be a blogger, and you might want to focus on one of the teams that you feel is of value, right? You start to produce content, short videos, tweet about what's happening with them and things like that. You start getting the followership from the fan base of that particular team itself, and go out to the events themselves and be out there and do things. And so those are opportunities in themselves. That's the informal sector or the entrepreneurial aspect of it, right? But then you also have the formal side of it, where these clubs could actually employ many of these young men and women coming out of these training programs, whether it's from Mr. Hussein's program or other avenues that they could use in terms of growing their product, their brand, and becoming more. So I think the mindset also has to change with the clubs themselves. How did Arsenal and Manchester United or Barcelona become global brands? And it's not because they just decided to become global brands or people just embraced them. No, they went out there and made the effort to become global brands, extended their viewership globally. It's not impossible for Asante Kotoko to become a global brand. for it to become recognized as far as Argentina, for it to be recognized in the USA, for it to be recognized in China, and so on and so forth. It's not impossible. The management of that particular team has to make the effort, has to decide that that's what they want to do. And if that's what they want to do, then they go after it. Nobody's going to push them towards that. They have to will themselves to do that. That's how business is done. Nobody's going to cater to you. You know, nobody's going to cater to you. You have to make the effort yourself. You know, I think that's what I think that's usually where our problems lie, because obviously we have the opinion that the platform has to be provided for us. The environment has to be created for us, right? Some of us who are in the space who understand the mindset, the entrepreneurial potential that's there. We're not waiting for anybody to tell us what to do. We're going out there and getting it. That's how it's done.
Very well. Very well. Very well, Mr. Koroma. Thank you. And I know we've eaten into the time of audience. At this point, I'm opening the floor for you. If you have a question, you may come in here. But as we wait for question, you can just raise your hand virtually or put a question in the chat box and I'll read it for our lead discussants to help us. But while if someone, okay, Bismarck, yeah, go ahead.
Karim, just to add before Bismarck comes in, just to add to
okay, that's fine.
What Mr. Koroma was saying, there are these two Kenyan gentlemen, Osembo and I think Weldon, who have come together to come up with a sports brand called Enda. Now, they capitalized on the reputation that Kenya has built as a long-distance running factory in Africa. They capitalized on that to come up with that brand. And only last year, they signed a $1 million deal to expand their brand, looking to compete with some of the global hit makers such as Nike, Adidas, and Puma. So what I'll add to it is that young people who are looking to get into the sporting space should also think about what they can do and also link it with a certain identity. Of course, if you are in Ghana, you cannot build something around long distance running because it is not our area. But of course, someone in Kenya or Ethiopia can do that. So young people need to relate to things that they can build on from where they come from on the continent.
That's a very fantastic point that you make. Thank you very much for that. Bismarck.
Yes, thank you very much, Karim, and your panelists for such an elaborative conversation. I see that we were a bit silent on electronic sports and the opportunity that exists in that space. I want our panelists to touch on that and elaborate. Somebody earlier also asked a question in the chat. I think the question was directed to Hussein at the point where he was talking about having degree or diploma to enter into sports. Somebody asked what happens to talents. The talent is if you don't have an education. I think at the point he was talking about the degree, he was talking about venturing into sports and then maybe working in administrative area. But somebody also wants to know about talent proper. So if you can touch on that. But I also want to hear the speaker's thoughts on electronic sports. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe Hussein will go first and I'll come to Mr. Koroma.
Can I come here?
Hussein, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I was speaking mainly on administrators and managers of sports. But speaking about talent, we're talking here about value chain. So I want to add this, that it starts with the talent. Now, there cannot be a value chain in sports without talent. It is not possible. The talent is the connection. The talent is what brings the managers, the administrators, the sponsors, the PR people, and all people connected to connected in the sports value chain. So without the talent, there cannot be a value chain. So that's where it starts from. With the talent,
you don't necessarily need professional qualification. I mean, but if you have professional qualification, it helps, because post-football, we've seen footballers who have driven into diverse areas post-football, and that's because they had some levels of qualification. Yusuf Chipsa, for example, is one person I deal with very closely, and he's involved in some of our training programs at UPSA because he has had some level of education. So education, as informal education, may not be so important for a talent, but it is important to have it post-career because you may need it.
Karim, I'm sorry, yeah, but I think this is an area that, you know, I mean, I don't like talking about the talent bits.
I know.
I would just break that code. I've worked with a lot of coaches in the background. I've helped player contract. Mr. Leslie mentioned Azamati. I was very significant in his move, and I'm still working with him. There have been a lot of Ghanaian players I've worked with, and I know Hussein may not know, but I've been in that field for a very long time. And I think with the talent, you're right, you don't need qualification, but you need network. Without a network, you'll not be able to get the best opportunity for these talents that are there. It is very difficult to spot talent, and so you have to work with people, right? And so basically, I think what seals this whole thing is network. In my case, I was very fortunate. Somebody gave my number to someone in the US, and that's how it began with me. I started with football, and then I moved to athletics. And these are the areas that I've been able to assist a lot of people in terms of management. Currently, I manage some of these athletes in both the top leagues that you know. And when I say manage, I'm not an agent. There are two things. There are people who are licensed agents. Theirs is business. And then there are managers. Theirs is, they have this sort of emotional connection with the players, where there is this agreement to, you know, represent them, and even their dealings with their agents sometimes, because it can be very brutal. And I've shared a video like that on my YouTube page, trying to help people out there. So regarding the talent, Hussein was right. We're talking about a value change. We trying to have a sort of like a meso level approach, where we are coupling both the micro sort of areas in the communities, and then government as well. But if you want us to discuss this, I think that would be a very good area to also look at how people can position themselves. And this is a very important word in marketing: how to position yourself, how to get the right people. And it is very easy. You don't need any how do you call it, an European, an American to start this space. It's very easy. You can simply slip into their Instagram, send messages to their tired, they'll respond. Right? A lot of people do that. Send messages, send videos, keep doing it. Those huge agents and managers out there would respond. And people do a lot like that. People do that with me. I receive messages every day. Those who know, I don't respond to all. Sometimes I do respond when I see something that catches my attention. Then I start networking, connecting to my network base, trying to get people out there. Yesterday, I shared a video of a boy called Balas Abubakar playing the MLS. I picked him. I mean, nobody even knew this guy will break through, right? So, and I try to connect with the parents, with the family, with everybody. So the process becomes, it's an African thing. So it's like a community approach. And the Kenyans say Ubuntu, right? I involve all these people in the process so that this sort of emotional connection from the family is also there. So everybody can see a talent, but not everybody can take them to the top. And if you want us to discuss this next time, I'll be more than willing to do that. But this is the first time I'm saying this. A lot of people in the sports and football circles in Ghana know me, and athletics as well. But I think it's the first time I'm saying it publicly. Yeah.
Wow. Very well, thank you. I want Mr. Koroma to then address Bismarck's question on the opportunities that exist in the e-space. I mean, a lot of young guys today are into betting. They call it investment. They make quite a good amount of money from there, but it's also a very addictive enterprise. But there's also esports where people are competing virtually and are winning prizes and all of that. So, Mr. Koroma, I don't know if this is an area that you have any knowledge in. You may share a few things on that. And we are going to be wrapping up very shortly. Our time is actually up, but we'll spend a few more minutes to try and wrap up nicely. Mr. Koroma.
Yeah, esports is one of those new areas of in the sports space that is open. It's wide open, and but the only snag there is what we call the digital divide. The digital divide now will be, of course, everybody has a smartphone, but you know, if you want to participate at the highest level, you need to have more than just a smartphone to be competitive with other guys out there in Asia as well as in the Americas and Europe. The ecosystem is growing in Africa. Obviously, there are a number of bodies out there that are putting together the necessary logistics to make esports a reality for many young men and women. The issue here is that, like I say, the digital divide. And so that digital divide definitely is a hindrance to high-level participation in esports, and that has to be solved. It can be solved by entrepreneurs. It can be solved by individuals who are just interested in being part of that ecosystem. But again, the structures are just not being put together. I don't know the current status of esports in Ghana, how it's structured, who were it's a sports code, it's a new sports code. And even the IOC is thinking about adopting esports as one of the Olympic disciplines for the future. And obviously esports involves not just, you know, because you have a variety of different types of games. You're either playing those fantasy games, or you're playing football, or you're doing, you know, boxing, or, you know, the fight games as well. So you have all of those. So which one you specialize in, it's up to you. There's a FIFA, you know, 22 and so on and so forth. You have those games. Like I said, the ecosystem is wide open, and in Ghana, and these are the opportunities that I say is available to the young men and women, the students who are coming out of university and looking at opportunities to step into. But you have to be bold about it, because look, like I said, entrepreneurship is not something that you'll be cuddled and be catered to. You have to fight every inch of the way to craft out your way and make things, bring things to reality. So the esports space is huge, it's big, it's full of opportunities, and yeah, the younger generation is there. The only thing, like I say, you have to look at a variety of different dynamics that are involved in this. The athletes that will be playing the games themselves, and the rules and regulations within your own local ecosystem, and how it relates to the wider nation in Ghana, or the West Africa, or the rest of Africa. And when you get to the global level where you stand, lots of money is being made in it as well. But like I said, you know, it's something that's been developed. And who is at the lead in Ghana? Who's at the lead in Nigeria? Who's at the lead in Senegal? Who's at the lead in Egypt, and so on and so forth? That's the question. And we need trailblazers, we need pioneers, people that's going to take the bull by the horns and help to craft out these spaces. Because, like I said, it's a wide open thing, and there'll be room for collaboration at the regional and continental level, and of course at the global level. But like I said, it's an industry, or it's a sports code that's wide open.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Koroma. I want to go to Mr. Chawe to make a comment quickly on the esports, and also, Mr. Chawe, I want you to do this for me. You will try and add your concluding remarks to this, and each person will take turns to do that as we try and wrap up. And so the floor is yours, sir. Oh, looks like we lost Chawe there. So what I'm going to do is that I'll move now to Mr. Hussein. I mean, I don't know if you have a comment on the esports. That's fine. Otherwise, you would try and sum it all up for us.
Okay, so I have something to say about the esports, and
Awesome.
it is a growing trend in world sports, and it's becoming very big. And like Mr. Kuruma said, it's an area that we can explore. Now, we have a rough idea about the makeup of uh, followers of traditional sports, but what we do not know is which group of people make up would make up followers of esports when it comes to Africa. Now, the opportunity for sports organizations, I mean, the GFA, and other sports associations to develop esports is that it is something you can sell to sponsors when it's opened up. I mean, you can make a case for, with the fact that you don't have your everyday sports people partaking in it. So it is a new market altogether that sponsors can explore. And so if we have people from the Ghana Football Association and other sports associations who are monitoring us, I think that Mr. Kuruma makes a very good point about it, and he seems to have a lot of ideas about it. We can put things together and then, give them a lead on this one because it is potentially a new market that they can explore.
Very well. Thank you very much, Mr. Hussein Arasan. I guess Mr. Chawe is not going to be back because he had initially sent me a message that he was running out. Is he back? Okay,
Yes.
okay. Okay, so yeah, so Mr. Chawe, you can make the point that you wanted to on the esports and then add your concluding remarks to that also.
Yeah, so I had to switch to my phone because my laptop went off. Yeah. So
Sorry.
the esports space, I just want to say that I was in Korea. I stayed in Korea for 2 years, and I witnessed the World Championship, the esports World Championship. This is not a joke. The stadium was filled. It's a 50,000 capacity stadium. It was filled to the brim. And for those who are interested, just go to YouTube and just type esports World Championship, right? And this, just like Olympic Games are managed by the IOC. The eSpace is managed by the International Esports Federation as well. There have been some universities that has taken the lead in studying this space. So, for instance, I know there are in Africa. I'm not sure if there are, but there are some universities in America, especially University of Delaware, and a couple of others in Korea as well. And there are others also in the IT section who does programming who are also into this space. So this is novel. They've been there for a while, but they are now being accepted into the mainstream. Of course, there are questions about whether it has a physical element, because they want to really define what esports is, because sports has this sort of physical element, but esports don't. But I know they are making a case that games like chess, like checkers or draft, as we call in Ghana, do not also require a lot of physical engagement. And people say yoga is a sport, so they also do a lot of concentration. These things are left to the organizations that run these programs to define. But I would say that for those who are interested, if you're looking into the future, this is an area you would want to explore. Some African countries have started having esports associations and what have you. The Ghana one, they contacted me some time back. Um, so that's basically what I want to say in a nutshell. And then just to wrap up, I think today is a very good program that we have to dialogue, to exchange ideas, and learn new things, particularly from Mr. Leslie and then Mr. Hussein as well. Different perspectives. Sometimes it's important to hear what others have to say. but more so a platform where we'll be able to share to many people. For me, is nothing better than that. I've always want to share with people what my experiences are, experiences I've gotten over the years. I'm not too old, but I've just been fortunate and lucky to occupy certain positions in this journey. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope we get time to do more of this. Yeah.
Very well, Mr. Chawai, thank you. And just before Mr. Kuroma comes in, I think it will be good at this point to share with us your YouTube link so that we could all get in there and watch the kind of content that you're making there on sport. So if you could put that in the chat, I'm sure we can. Our friends at ASU can also share it on their platforms so that a lot of people can get in touch. Mr. Kuroma, you have the final word, sir.
Yes, thank you very much for this very informative and very interesting discussion on sports for development and sports for peace and development on this International Day of Sports for Peace and Development. Like I say, my advocacy is about how to transform the sports sector in Africa to one that will be of value to the rest of the continent. From the highest level to the most minute level to the village level, we want to see everybody realizing value. At the same time, we want to see policies being implemented. We want the leaders of our nations, the presidents themselves, and that's why I said we were fortunate to have President George Weah in our very first conference that we had in 2020. There was a virtual conference. That was the first Pan-African sports conference that we had, and so. Had President George Weah. It was a massive event. If you guys want to see the content from there, you can visit africasvg.com. That's www.africasvg.com. That's our website for Africa Sports Ventures Group. We're involved in a number of initiatives out there. We're currently, last year we launched, we're into sports and entertainment. So last year we launched the African Music Challenge. It's a music talent competition. In which over 40 countries participated. It's africamusicchallenge.com as well. And you can find African Music Challenge on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and so on and so forth. We're getting ready for season 2 for African Music Challenge. Personally, over the years, for me, I started off from after my retirement from being an active athlete, I started off from sports media. I still run the sports media site, which is africansportsmonthly.com. Founded the very first comprehensive sports magazine for Africa. When I say comprehensive, not just football, we covered every sport. African Sports Monthly, and you can still visit africansportsmonthly.com. Right now, we're going through a transformation, getting ready for a relaunch, but like I say, the website is there. You can visit africansportsmonthly.com. I'm proud of the work that we have done over the years to get to where we are right now in terms of taking the message of sports for Africa to the rest of the world. And you can also check out the websites, the YouTube pages and Twitter pages. And then I do run a personal podcast called the African Sports Report Podcast. And the African Sports Report Podcast you can find on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts. You can find any platform. Just type in Africa Sports Report Podcast. This is what I do, and this is what I've done, and my contribution to this space. And I continue to be passionate about my contribution to this space. I look forward to coming to Ghana next year for the African Games, to be in Ghana for the African Games. That's massive. We ought to be pushing that narrative right now to the rest of the world. The Africa Cup of Nations is coming. Gone next is the African Games, which is in Ghana next year. That's the next biggest sporting property on the continent, and we need to project that to the rest of the world. It's our Olympics, and so we need to see that being projected out there. So I'm happy, excited about this type of conversations. I'm happy to be in the same space with these two gentlemen and what it can bring to the table as well, alongside with yourself, Kareem. You've been a great host, and definitely appreciate very talented, very knowledgeable. Look forward to meeting you in person sometime in the near future. Mr. Hussein as well, the marketer, definitely a very astute gentleman there with the marketing knowledge. I appreciate that. That's really massive. I look forward to meeting you yourself. And Mr. Chawe, definitely what you're involved in could be areas of synergy. So let's connect someone one way or the other. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. Leslie Koroma is the name, and you can find me on Twitter as well. Let's connect and let's continue to make this push this narrative and grow the sports space and make it what it ought to be at the end of the day. I thank you all and all the listeners who logged on, who were here with us, and I appreciate you all, and look forward to maybe another substantive discussion in the future.
Very well, Mr. Koroma. Thank you so much. Yeah. Sure.
Yes. So just to announce this, you know, at the University of Professional Studies, Accra, we are focused on building the next leaders for sports. So we are organizing training programs in sports management and marketing. We are soon hoping to, by the next academic year, introduce an MA in sports management. And I'm extending this to Mr. Koroma and Mr. Derek as well. I'm sure that at some level, I would like to have you guys around in my class in person, virtually, to, you know, to speak to some of the students who are engaged in our class. So that's just the final bit that I have here.
Very well. And for me, this is the part of the conversation that I've enjoyed the most. I mean, the networking that we talked about, we're already seeing that here. And so it will be great that for all of us, we get in touch. Mr. Chawe has shared the YouTube platform on the chat. You can just get onto that and then subscribe to it. Let's help push it, share it with others, and let us all learn from the content that's available. And of course, what Mr. Hussein has also said is very important. You can look forward to that. And hopefully, if we have Mr. Koroma, Mr. Chawe find time to also join the class and all of that, ultimately, we're all going to benefit greatly from that. And so thank you to everybody. And we've had Mr. Leslie Koroma, founder and CEO of Africa Sports Ventures. Mr. Hussein Al-Hassan, he's a lecturer at UPSA Accra and a lecturer in sports marketing, journalist as well. Mr. Derek Okpoti Chawe is a PhD candidate with the Norwegian School of Sports Sciences, and they've been very, very useful for all of us today. Bismarck, I'll give you the final bit there as the lead organizer for this to say something to all of us and to call the meeting to an end. Yes.
I've put my video on so that my guests will see the face behind the video. See it several times. I want to thank all three speakers so much for being able to participate in this very, very important discussion. Thank you for your responses to your emails. I know you are very, 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 very busy, but anytime I send emails, you made time to respond to them. And I want to thank you very much for making time for the students of Africa. I want to also carry the thanks of the Secretary General of the All Africa Students Union, who is exactly Peter Kosikoji, who also has another section of this kind going on. That's why he couldn't join us here, but I want to be very assured that he very much thanks you for being able to join us. I will be putting the video. It was streamed live on Facebook. It was also recorded, so the video will also be put on our YouTube platforms and shared with other colleagues who could not join us. So thank you very much, everybody. And I will certainly get back to you again for another discussion. I know the esports discussion was getting interesting. People will want to know more. I also think the value chain discussion was also getting very interesting.
So once again, thank you for the time and everything. You ask it, now you have it. So what we plan to do is basically to introduce you to various sports scholarships.
Yes.
Very well. All right, so thank you, everybody. And this is where we part company, and we're going to definitely meet again sometime. So have a nice day to everybody. Bye.
A very good friend of mine.
Bye.
And we came up with this initiative.